The biggest challenge right now is all the proprietary platforms. Stripe, which is the big dog on the block, is getting themselves into everything. They're even now involved with QuickBooks merchant services, but Shopify and things like that. A lot of the CRM platforms, your only vendor of choice is Stripe, and you get introduced to someone because they realize they're overpaying, they're not getting the support, they don't have a human interaction, and they say, well, I'm really stuck into this POS system, or I'm really locked into this CRM. And I said, well, the first thing you have to do to get away from Stripe is you have to give up that platform.
Welcome to Mastering the Numbers, the podcast dedicated to providing insights into business and entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Joe Mallow. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Numbers. I am Joe Mallow with the Lead Edge Consulting Group. Today, my guest is John Saluk. He is the owner of Priority Payment Systems in Pompano Beach, Florida. John, thanks for taking a part in my interview series.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to learning a little bit more. And so let's just start there. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about Priority Payment Systems?
Sure. I provide merchant account solutions for any way you want your customers to pay you by credit card. I do that in all 50 states, and I've been doing it since 2003. And my focus is on technology to make your business more efficient, more effective, and more profitable before we even look at your merchant statement.
Okay. And how long have you been in this industry?
Since 2023, or 2003, so
Okay.
I'm starting my 23rd year.
Were you doing this in the corporate world before you started your own business, or was this something new?
I was in other sales. I was in mostly financial services, life insurance, stockbroker stuff, and that got a little crazy. I was doing that in the early 2000s, late 90s, which was the whole .com bomb, and I found a way into this, and I really enjoy it. It's a lot more, laid back. There's no ups and downs. I don't worry about the market per se, and the residualized income is fantastic.
Yeah, coming from the financial world, I know what you're talking about as far as when the internet bubble burst. I was in the industry as well. So, so what prompted you to start your own business instead of maybe going into working for some other corporation that does something somewhat similar?
Well, the big difference is if you go work for some of the bigger banks, they'll pay you a paycheck and they'll put some expectations, maybe give you an office and a desk, but the residuals are either very low or for only a short time. And in sales, this is really the lifetime residuals. And when it's lifetime, it's a lifetime of the account. So even if you pass away, you can still legacy this to your family, whatever. So that's the big difference. That's why going out on your own and hanging your own shingle, so to speak, is really the long term way to do it. Does it take longer to get up and running and get to that level? Oh, absolutely. But 23 years ago, it was a different landscape back then.
Right. So, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to deal with over the last 20 plus years in growing your
The
company?
biggest challenge right now is all the proprietary platforms. Stripe, which is the big dog on the block, is getting themselves into everything. They're even now involved with QuickBooks merchant services, but Shopify and things like that. A lot of the CRM platforms, your only vendor of choice is Stripe. And you get introduced to someone because they realize they're overpaying, they're not getting the support, they don't have a human interaction, and they say, well, I'm really stuck into this POS system, or I'm really locked into this CRM. And I said, well, the first thing you have to do to get away from Stripe is you have to give up that platform. And that sometimes becomes, a conversation ending conversation.
Yeah, I certainly been using Stripe for quite a while myself, so I think we're going to need to talk a little bit more about your platform. So, because
Sure.
I get it.
As long as you don't have a proprietary POS system.
I do not. I do not. I just use one out there. So when you look back over those 20 years, Is there anything you would have done differently growing the business? Kind of that hindsight 2020.
Absolutely. The big thing that I migrated to Interchange Plus pricing several years later than I should have. And that's the only thing I put people on now. It's the most complex because people are so used to, oh, what's your rate? And flat 3.5% with Stripe. But Interchange Plus, it's not that simple because there's 75 different interchange categories depending on your business type, your SIC code. Are you a for-profit, nonprofit, transaction size, how you process the card type? There's so many complexities, but the important thing for the business owner is that every time you run a card, you know you're getting the best possible rate for that particular transaction. And when you get your statement, there's full transparency. This is how much the card association charged you. This is how much your merchant account provider charged you. And you don't get that in flat or tiered pricing.
Yeah, yeah. I don't see that coming across my plate either. So, you've been doing this for a long time. Do you have a support team around you? Do you have employees that you deal with as well?
I don't necessarily have employees because I used to be a sales manager and I call it being a professional babysitter, and I gave up on that years ago. But I do have a support team. There's a local office in Huntington, Long Island, that I'm basically affiliated with right underneath them. They're called Score Processing, and they're fantastic. Then there's also Priority Payment Systems, the billion-dollar publicly traded company based out of Alpharetta, Georgia. And then there's also they have a sales office in Hicksville, Long Island. And you call the 800 number, you're going to get to one of those three offices if you can't get me. But I'm usually pretty available. I I'm always working. I'm always not working. If it's a Sunday and the phone rings or you text me and I'm available, I'll respond. I'll
Yeah,
jump on my laptop. I've got people access to their merchant account when they lock themselves out. And then there's times you're on a cruise and the phone's turned off and you're in the middle of the ocean and they got to call the 800 number. But there's always someone available 24/7, 365.
that's good. So, I mean, you mentioned about taking phone calls on a Sunday. How do you find some sort of work life balance? Is that typical for you to take calls on Sundays, or?
I wouldn't say typical, but I do have one long-standing client of mine, and when he gets cold called all the time, from the big banks, and they say, "Are you going to take my call on a Sunday?" And they're like, "What? I don't work on Sunday." He's like, "Well, then you just lost my business." So I don't mind, if I'm doing nothing, if I'm sitting watching a football game or I'm just hanging out, chilling out, and the phone rings. I don't mind stepping away for a few minutes to answer that phone because it really makes people feel special. And I've had merchants really come and go, "Wow, I can't believe you actually responded to my text on a Sunday. You answered my phone call on a Sunday. You got back to my email on a Sunday, or a holiday or whatever it is." And, for businesses that, they don't have, Sunday isn't a day off for every business. Holidays aren't a
Yeah,
day off for every business. They
right.
really appreciate that, and it's way better than trying to call into an 800 number, sitting on hold, explaining who you are, giving your credentials, going through all the security. Well, they just go, "Hey, John, it's me. All right, what's your problem, Joe?" And we solve it in less
Yeah,
than 5 minutes.
yeah, yeah. And I know my clients definitely appreciate me picking up the phone at odd times of the day and during the week. So, so that kind of leads into one more thing. I mean, how do you avoid burnout then if you're taking calls any day of the week potentially?
Well, the calls don't happen that often, but I also, last week I wanted to go to El Paso, Texas with a group of friends for the weekend. So I basically blocked my calendar Thursday and Friday. Monday was a holiday. I blocked it off so no one could get on my calendar link and book an appointment. And I jumped on a flight Thursday morning, didn't come home till Monday night. Did I Was I available if the phone rang? Sure, but it really didn't ring too much because it was a holiday weekend. But that's really how I do it. When if I want to take time off, I block it out on my schedule, and I don't specifically book an appointment. I don't book a networking event. I don't book a Zoom call. But if the phone rings and I'm available, why
Yeah,
wouldn't I answer it?
yeah. I think that's great to do it that way. So you spent a lot of time in this industry. I'm sure others are trying to get into this industry. What's what's the most challenging part about it? On a
The most challenging part is that a lot of people come to this industry selling something else and they weren't doing well, and they say, "Oh, let me try this," because it's one of those industries that'll kind of pretty much hire anybody and give you the old, here's your sales book and a little pat on the bottom and go get them, killer, you know. And they do it for a month or 2 or 3 months, and they signed up their local pizza place, their mom's friend, their dry cleaner, and then they get that residual check, and it's $27. It's like, whoa, I can't live on this. And they don't have the wherewithal, the means to build up that book of business to where you can make a real income, whether it's family support, a spousal support, you're still living in your mom's basement, whatever it is. You have to have that ability to get over the hump, if you will, unless sign up the Gordon Gecko whale right out of the gate, and you make several $1,000s a month on that one particular new account, which it happens. But you can't build a business on, hey, I'm going to sign up a whale.
Yeah. For those people out there that don't have the patience sometimes to grow a business like yours, how long did it take you? How many years did it take you before those residuals were really meaningful?
Well, it's when I was doing this 20 plus years ago, it was a completely different landscape. Costco wasn't selling merchant services. Stripe didn't exist. So back then, I averaged between 15 and 25 new merchant accounts a month. And back then it was, cold canvassing. It was parking the end of a strip mall and walking in and how's your Visa? How's your MasterCard? Cold calling. And it was a different landscape. So you could sign up a lot more merchants a lot faster back then than you can today. With the Stripes of the world and the competition, and it's not as easy to sign up merchants as quickly. Plus, we also had different things back then. You could lease a terminal, and make significant money quickly, on the lease of a terminal to offset, your meager residuals while you were building them, and that was how you offset it.
Right. And some of those things just aren't available now, right?
Correct. Yeah,
So
no
it's a
one's going to
different.
lease a terminal for 24, 34, $40 a month.
Yeah, not anymore. Well, business changes. I mean, it's constantly
Sure.
changing. I'm sure there's still great opportunities in your industry if
Oh,
someone's willing
absolutely.
to if someone's willing to do the work, as as in every industry, right? So, where do you see your business in the next 12 to 36 months?
Continue to do the same thing I'm doing. I'm kind of more on the downward slope. I'm not ready to hang it up yet. And this is also a business you really don't retire from per se. My idea of retirement is I stop going to the networking events. I don't renew my chamber membership. I don't renew my BNI membership. But you keep up with your social media. If the phone rings, you answer it. You get an email. Someone like you calls me, hey, I got my friend's opening a pizza place. He needs a merchant account. Okay, sure, let's set him up. We'll get him going. Um, Beyond that, it comes to a point where, and this becomes threading a needle, if you will, is eventually, I want to cash out, and what you do is you sell your book of business to someone. But I don't want to do that too soon because I have merchants that are with me 10, 15 years. So the average multiple is in the 3 year range. Why would I sell a book of business that's been there for 10 plus years to only take 3 years of future residuals? I think I'm leaving
Yeah,
too much on the table. But I get to a point where I don't want to leave my legacy for my wife or my wife's daughter or someone like that, my brother's kids, to have to now negotiate with someone to buy my book of business when they don't know anything about it. So there is that sweet spot of finding just the right spot to say, you know what, now it's time to just pull the chips off the table, load them up
yeah,
in treasuries or something, and just kind of ride off into the sunset and don't worry about it anymore. But I'm still a long way off from that. Unless I get hit by a bus tomorrow, then all bets are off the table.
that's true. That'll change things immediately. So, have you done any type of business planning or exit planning in case something like that did happen?
A business plan?
Yeah, business planning, exit planning to, in case something happened to you and the family had to take over.
I really don't. That's a fantastic question. Um, my wife, she struggles just to figure out how to open the safe. And I told her if something happens to me, the first thing you have to do is open the safe because that's where everything is. All the life insurance, all the account numbers for the 401ks and the trust and the crypto and she struggles just opening the safe. So yeah, she'd she'd probably struggle for a short while.
Yeah. Well, hopefully someone's there to
I
help
mean,
her get
not
that
struggle
safe open.
financially. The money would still be coming in.
Yeah,
She
of
would just
course.
struggle and what to do with it and how to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes for a lot of spouses that aren't doing it on a day to day basis. I think my wife would have some problems as well. I put together a nice big book in case something happens to me, but she has to get in the safe to get it.
There you go.
How do you differentiate yourself from the rest of your competition that's sitting out there? Like I guess what are
That's
the
very
biggest things that
important
differentiate
because
you?
there's a billion of me out there. The two ways that I differentiate myself is one, the 23 years. Most people that are doing what I'm doing are doing it a few months or less, and a few months from now, they'll be doing something different. And then, secondly, is the technology aspect of it. Most of my competition sells strictly on price because all they have is a very basic one dimensional merchant account. I posted on Facebook or social media today was, were you a victim of send me your statement? I'll cut your rates. If I can't cut your rates, I'll cut your check and it costs you money. Because that's what most people sell, and they commoditize themselves because like we spoke earlier, they just need to make that sale. They gotta ring the register, and they don't care at what cost. And we call that the race to zero when you just keep cutting costs. At some point, you got to sell on value. And the MX Merchant platform, MX Merchant, is we call it a unified commerce ecosystem because any way you touch, move, or park money, we have a solution. So whether it's an app for your smartphone, whether it's a suite of apps for recurring billing, invoicing, surcharging, we have integrated banking with treasuries. There's so many businesses out there sitting with significant money, $100,000 or more in a checking account, earning 0.01% interest because they got to cover payroll or pay vendors, but they're losing money every month. You open a merchant account with me, you put that money in the passport, you can now earn 2.75% in treasuries with same day liquidity and 4% with 3 day liquidity. Now you could be making hundreds of dollars per month instead of losing money. And you can either pay your vendors or payroll right out of Passport or same day sweep it to your operating account and pay your bills like you normally do. And it's things like that that really make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely need to find out more, and I'm sure the audience, especially business owners, would like to find a little bit more as well. So, let's go in a different direction. What's some of the best advice you've ever received? Business advice.
Best advice I've ever gotten. I'm going to say it wasn't so much advice, but it was a character that I wanted to be. There was a job I worked at, and this one guy came in, and he never reacted. He never lost his cool. Everything could be going to chaos around him, and he'd be like, "Well, why do you feel that way?" But this, and it just seven whys in a way, and it would drive you crazy. But I'm like, I want to be like that guy. I want to be calm when everything else is going. And I sat and had plenty of talks with him, bought him lunches, bought him beers, bought him coffee, just to pick his brain. And I've gotten a lot better at, instead of defending, ask the why question and then a follow-up why question and staying calm and what do you think is the best solution. And I've really found that to really help out in relationships and not destroying relationships, because whenever you get defensive and then it becomes heated, it becomes elevated, it becomes argumentative, and that never ends well.
Yeah, agreed. So, in the same kind of direction as that question, let's say you ran into someone. They're a couple years into owning a business. They're stressed. Maybe things aren't going as well as they thought. What type of, I guess, what type of advice would you give that individual?
I think that the big thing would have to make sure that they're managing their time effectively, because there's nothing like working 16-hour days and 7 days a week. You don't see your family, your kids are going on without you, and you're really not getting everything done, because you're micromanaging things, or you're doing $10 an hour jobs. If you're doing $10 an hour jobs, you're a $10 an hour employee. Pay someone to do that $10 an hour job. I used to do my own newsletter, and I used to write the own content, and I used to struggle every month for a monthly newsletter. And I finally got introduced to someone who's like, I got someone in the Philippines will do it for you. Now, once every 2 months, they send me like 10 different ideas. I pick 8 of them, and over several months, those become the articles. They write them, they put them together. I just approve them, and it's so much less stressful. And that's just one aspect of it. So don't be afraid to delegate. Don't be a control freak. Don't think you have to have your hand on every button.
Yeah.
Trust your staff.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Well, listen, once again, I really appreciate you taking time and jumping on a podcast with me. If anybody wants to get a hold of you to find out more about how you can help them with their merchant services, what's the best way?
The best way, if you want to find out more about me and who I am and how I help, would be LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is my last name, or my first name, John Saluk. And or you can call me at 516-250-9536, or send me an email at jsaluk@prth.com.
Awesome. Well, listen, everybody out there that's dealing with high charging platforms like the Stripes of the world, reach out to John. I know he can help you. Listen, everybody out there that showed up, I appreciate you taking part in my interview series, and look forward to catching up with everybody on the next episode. John, listen, once again, thank you very much, and I definitely want to get more information myself.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure.
All right, John. Take care. Take care, everybody out there.
You've just tuned into another episode of Mastering the Numbers. We hope you found valuable insight to boost your financial success. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Keep pushing forward, and thanks for listening.